right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAT or a subscription.
Banking with Capital One helps you. All right, so we should probably. All right, so we should probably mention the steamship Actor or Archter. I've seen it both ways, but that kind of kicks off the story for us, don't you think?
Yeah, well, we haven't the major players either yet, have we?
No, I guess we could go either way. We can mention one or the other first.
All right, let's mention the players, because these are the actual keepers of that lighthouse.
Okay.
You have the principal keeper, James Ducat. You have the second assistant. Wouldn't he be the first assistant?
No, Donald MacArthur. We'll get into that.
Okay. Thomas Marshall was the second assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And then Donald MacArthur was the occasion, right?
Yeah, here's my bit. So he was filling in for a guy named William Ross. William Ross was the first assistant keeper, which meant that since Donald MacArthur was filling in for him, Donald MacArthur was the first assistant keeper, even though he was an occasional keeper.
Okay, that makes sense. And William Ross was on sick leave, and just judging from the movie The Lighthouse and all this research, like, you must have had to have been really sick to get taken off the island.
Yes, but
I think.
Yes, that's what I thought too. But doing research for this, I found that these guys all of them had a rotating 2 weeks off. So at any given point over a stretch of 2 weeks, one of those men, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, or William Ross, would not be on the island because they rotated 2 week shore leave, basically. So I was of the impression that if you went and tended a lighthouse, they dropped you off, left you with some food, and said, "See you never."
But that's not the case.
No. I think they were well taken care of. I get the impression the Northern Lighthouse Board was pretty good at its job and really cared about these people and looked after them. I didn't see anything to deny that.
Yeah, well, it's a brutal and important job, so surely they were taken care of at least to a certain degree.
Yeah, but the upside of all this is that there were 3 men on the island,
3 dudes,
working that lighthouse. Aside from them sheep, that was it. That was the only people on the island. And this, by the way, this is December of 1900, right?
Yeah, so this thing is brand new.
Yeah, they built it in 1899. It was scheduled to take 2 years. It took 4 years. The construction was started in 1895. And what they built was, at the time, a state-of-the-art lighthouse. But it took so long, it took twice as long as they anticipated, because the cliffs and the island itself was so treacherous. That's how long it took just to get materials up the cliff to build the lighthouse.
Yeah, so it's finally in operation, and then now comes the Actor, which is what you mentioned earlier, not ACTOR, but the Actor, ACHTER.
Yeah, it was a transatlantic steamship from Philadelphia to Leith, which is a port for Edinburgh.
That's right. So they were out there, I was about to say sailing around, but I guess they were steaming around.
Mm-hmm.
And they waited out a storm for a few days, and then this part got confusing to me.
So the Actor was passing by Flannan Isles. It passed by on December 15th. And the Actor noticed that the light was out. Not that they couldn't see the light because of weather or anything like that. The light was straight up not lit on the lighthouse, on Flannan Isles Lighthouse. It was a very strange thing to see. And it was very noteworthy. They ran into some weather on their way to Leith and had to wait it out for a few days. And when they finally made it into port, I guess they passed the information along, but the Northern Lighthouse Board didn't catch wind of it until the official relief supply ship showed up a few days later. And the Actor's observation that the light was out wouldn't come into play until an investigation was launched later on.
Right, so that relief ship was the Hesperus, Hesperus, and that arrived on December 26th, 1900, which is Boxing Day, after Christmas. And what these ships brought was they usually brought either supplies or fresh dudes or both. And in this case, I think they had supplies and a fresh lighthouse keeper. And it was captained by Captain Harvey. And they were like, all right, something's going on here. This light's out. The flag's not flying. Let me toot on the horn a few times. Toot, toot, toot. Nobody comes out. All right, well, let me send up a flare. They send up a flare. No one comes out. And what they're trying to do is say, hey, we're here. Get your little rail car system going. It had a little cable pulled railroad system that was operated by a steam engine in a shack. And so when the ship pulls up, they would toot the horn, and the dudes would come down, and they would get that steam engine going and get that cable car ready to transfer the goods onto this thing so they could, it's like hundreds of pounds of stuff going up a really, really steep cliffside.
Yeah, there's just no way to move that stuff otherwise.
No, you'd have to do it. So nobody came out. No one gets that steam shack going. And they're like, all right, something's going on. We're going to have to go on land and figure this out.
Yeah, and just the fact that they weren't greeted by one or more of the guys from the lighthouse, which is apparently custom. Like even the most grizzled misanthrope lighthouse keeper just knew it was custom to come down and greet the relief ship.
You're still dying to see someone else.
Pretty much, I think so.
know?
Yeah. So that the fact that no one showed up and then no one responded to their signals, they were like, something really weird is going on here. And they had Joseph Moore, who was the relieving keeper, which makes me think that William Ross was really, really sick, because he would have been on sick leave for way over 2 weeks by this time, because I believe the relief ship was 5 days late because of weather. So he must have really been laid up. And they sent another relieving keeper, Joseph Moore, instead. And Joseph Moore went ashore, and he was friends with these guys. He wasn't some new dude or anything like that, so he was genuinely concerned. And he went up the steps to the lighthouse. There's apparently 160 of them. And he just knew right away that something was way off. There was no sign of life. There was nobody around. There was just nothing was going on. It was abandoned, basically. And he didn't have a very good feeling about it. So he runs back down to the boat and say, I think we have a problem here.
Yes. So he says, I think we have a problem. And then that's when basically everyone on board said, all right, this is a situation now that we all have to deal with. I think it was the captain more to search for other stuff. They said, in the meantime, you other guy, you got to get up there and start operating this lighthouse, because it's been down and we need to get that thing cranked up again.
Yes. So for the first time, possibly since December 15th, the lighthouse was lit again by these relief guys who took over and kind of settled in and were like, all right, this is our job now. But that follow-up search, it's weird. Like, we'll talk about some of the legends and layers that were added to it over the years. But to me, the thing that was like so weird about the follow-up search was that everything was in place. It would be way more like kind of middle of the road to me, this mystery, if there was like signs of struggle or there were everything was just kind of askew. It's way more eerie to me that like everything was exactly how it should have been. It's just the three human beings that were supposed to be there were missing. But that's what Joseph Moore found, and the others found when they searched a lot more thoroughly.
Yeah, the door to the keeper's house was closed. The gate was closed. In the kitchen, everything was all spick and span. Everything was all cleaned up. It was clear that someone had done some cooking in the grate, but not anytime soon. There were ashes in there. The beds were made. The clocks had all stopped because no one was there to wind them, obviously. And everything was fine, except, like you said, that there was no one around. There was a full fountain of paraffin oil. It was all like the light was ready to be burned. The lamp, that Fresnel lens, was cleaned up and ready to go. The blinds were drawn. The records were all filled out, all the way up until Saturday, I think the morning of December 15th, right?
Yep.
And so everything was great, except for there were two missing sets of rain gear. They're called oilskins. Their coats and their boots. Two of those were missing out of the three guys. And so that's sort of the only thing out of the ordinary at this point.
Yeah, that was basically the only trace of the missing men. Like had oilskins still been there, you would have taken the lighthouse and the area as like having been prepared for somebody else. They just hadn't shown up yet. Like the missing oilskins were the only trace that those men were missing. That there had been men there that were no longer.
Right. And then there were a couple of pieces of literature that kind of confused things after the fact, right?
Yeah, that really kind of made this, like, to a lot of people, like a much bigger mystery. I think some people came along and weren't satisfied with how mysterious it was on its own, and so added to it over the years through magazine articles and newspaper reports, and then later on, like podcasts and stuff. And so you really have to be careful navigating these waters, if you'll excuse the pun or the stupid metaphor, when you're researching this, because so much of it is just regurgitated as fact, because it has been part of the story for 100 years. That it was actually thanks to the efforts of a journalist named Mike Dash, who, if you are at all interested in nonfiction writing, especially nonfiction history writing, go check out Mike Dash's website. He's probably the best in the business.
Oh yeah.
But yes, he's just amazing. But he set his sights on getting to the bottom of this, and he did some stuff and basically finally definitively proved, no, this was added to it later on, this was added to it later on, this is not true, that kind of stuff. So hats off to Mike Dash for demystifying a lot of it.
True, but also making it not as fun. Because it's decidedly creepier with these newspaper stories, as the stories talked about the logbook. This is completely fabricated, you know. Like Mike Dash exposed it as fabrication,
Right.
But it's still pretty creepy. The log entries and the fake log entries were by not by second assistant marshal, but this is how they wrote it.
Right.
And wrote on December 12th, they saw severe winds, the likes of which I've never seen before in 20 years. And wrote, and these are people that have seen some of the worst storms you could imagine,
Right.
out there on these outer islands, and pretty unshakable guys, I would think.
Right.
And he said he wrote in the next 2 days that the storm continued and was so unbearable that Ducat, the principal keeper, was struck mute by the storm, and that occasional keeper MacArthur, who was supposedly a really tough guy, was recorded as weeping uncontrollably for days because of how bad the storm was.
Right. Yeah.
It's good stuff.
It is good stuff, but Mike Dash made mincemeat out of it, and he's kind of my hero for it. One of the things that he basically just points out is, if this were an official logbook, if you were a second assistant, you put that in there, you would basically get fired for that kind of thing. Like, that's not what a logbook is for. And you certainly wouldn't put that your superior was weeping uncontrollably in the logbook. Like, that's just not what you would put in a logbook in the first case. And then secondly, he also said that somebody being quiet because of a storm or whatever, or their mood, like it also kind of mentions their mood a lot too, that would have no bearing on anything.
Yeah.
And the only way that makes sense in relation to the story is after the fact, which he said, obviously that means that things were written after the fact. And then years later, after he'd first investigated it, he finally turned up a copy of the magazine that this came out in like 1921, and it was like a pulp magazine called like True Confessions or something like that. So he definitely deconstructed that to my great satisfaction. I love it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny though. Like, the logbook was basically like your diary.
That's exactly right. He said like logbooks were not diaries.
No, they weren't.
He actually specifically said that. Yeah,
It's funny. The other thing he uncovered, or did he uncover the poem, or was that just?
specifically said that. Yeah.
That's funny. The other thing he uncovered, or did he uncover the poem, or was that just?
I think that was a little more common knowledge, but yeah, he wrote about the poem being the poem too.
Okay, so in 1912 there was a poem by Wilfred Wilson Gibson, who wrote a poem about this mystery where he says there was an untouched meal on the table, cold meat, pickles, and potatoes. The kitchen chair was knocked over. The only sign of life was the keeper's canary, half starving on his perch. Like, these are all the things that you mentioned would have made this a different story,
Yeah.
but everything was really just fine. I don't even think the chair was turned over, right?
I don't know. I think
The guy later on, well, we'll get to him.
Yeah, the way I treated it is that it's possible. Okay, I don't know if Mike Dash treated it like that way. Mike Dash wrote about a later guy who we'll talk about,
Yeah.
who treated it as fact. So
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
I think what the upshot of it is that in doing like this research on primary resources, like what Joseph Moore wrote what Robert Muirhead, who we'll talk about, wrote. These people who were actually there when it happened or right after it happened. That nobody mentioned anything like a turned over chair. And based on what they did mention, it seemed like they probably would have mentioned a turned over chair. They were so meticulous in the details.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the evidence that was there.
Okay.
Because what we're really talking about is, was there, I mean, the kind of obvious thing you would think about is a storm that washed these guys away forever. Like, that's kind of the one reasonable explanation. And so as far as evidence goes, most of it is storm related for the, you know, to sort of support that and to go against it. There was a railway that we talked about, and that had a crane, and the crane was sort of, you know, built to help unload things off of this platform, off the cargo container, and it was about 70 feet above sea level, and it was fine. It even still had the canvas wrapped around it. So if there was some big storm, and evidence shows there probably was one, right? But at least this crane 70 feet up wasn't damaged, and that canvas was still there, which is a little weird.
It is a little weird because even a little higher up toward the top of the cliff, so the crane is at about 70 feet above sea level, right?
Yeah.
A little higher up than that, about 110 feet above sea level, there was a big box that held a lot of like mooring ropes and ropes for the crane and just some really important stuff, tackle. And it had been busted open and the contents like strewn all down the cliff's face. There was a buoy that was tied to the railing right around the same place as that crate 110 feet above sea level. It had been torn clean away from the ropes that had lashed it to the railing. The ropes were still there, but the buoy, just a little piece of buoy was left attached to it. And yet the crane was intact. And then even weirder, the iron railings around the crane that you would use as handrails had just been completely twisted and wrenched out of place.
That's a heck of a storm.
It's an amazing storm. It's crazy to me that the crane was left intact and that the canvas was even on it still.
That was really weird. There was a 2,000-pound stone that was up on the cliff that slid down. And then I believe the railway tracks were even torn up from the concrete. And then the grass ripped up as far back.
Nuts. Like, do you know how much force a wave would have to tear up grass in the first place? And then that thing would have to be over 200 feet tall to even reach that grass.
That's a bad storm.
It's a monster wave. But the storm part, that kind of confounds things big time. And I think we should take another break and we'll talk about how everything's just so confounded still to this day, which is why this is a mystery, right after this.
This Labor Day, say goodbye to spills, stains, and overpriced furniture with WashableSofas.com. Featuring Anabay, the only machine washable sofa inside and out, where designer quality meets budget-friendly pricing. Sofas start at just $6.99, making it the perfect time to up if you're not.
Terms apply. Everybody knows that paint color price varies by sheet. Not entirely.
And but he's also, that's right, strong winds flow was, these three men are missing. All right, we've got this mystery brewing. These three men are missing. It's pretty clear that there was a big storm that blew through there. So, like I said earlier, the obvious explanation was these strong winds just came along and just blew these guys the heck off this island, and they were never seen again.
That's not entirely out of the question because of the butt of Lewis.
That's right. Strong winds flow from the butt of Lewis, as everyone knows. And I'm 12 years old. Robert Muirhead, he was the superintendent of lighthouses, and he investigated this disappearance. He knew all these guys, some really, really well, but I think the occasional keeper he knew the least, but he still knew pretty well.
Right.
He's the one that did this investigation personally, and went out there, wrote up this report, and I think he was the last person. He was out there because it was a new lighthouse, I guess, sort of finishing up, and I don't know if he christened it or whatever, but he was one of the last, in fact, maybe the last person to even see them alive, right?
He says in his report that he's probably the last person to shake hands with these men and see them alive when he shoved off on December 7th, when the last relief ship, the previous relief ship had come along.
All right, so in his official report, he said, I don't think it was a strong wind that literally blew them off the island. It was blowing westerly that day, and that means it would have blown them back inland toward the island, and there's no way that these guys would have blown completely across the whole face of the island off the other side, because they know what to do. They know to drop and get flat and hold on, and they probably would not have been blown all the way off if it was westerly.
They need to stop, drop, and do not roll.
Yeah, don't roll. Please don't roll.
Not in that case.
I would grab something heavy.
Yeah, anything, a sheep, whatever, anything that will keep you from being blown off. But that's just
Grab a sheep.
It shows you how windy it is up there. That was a possibility that Muir had considered, and was plausible enough that he had to at least put it in the report as a possibility.
That's right.
The one that he focused on, that most people who think in level-headed ways kind of agree with too, is that instead a wave probably came along and knocked these men off.
Yeah, I mean, this one, I'm an amateur when it comes to like figuring out Scottish island mysteries and weather. This one makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, totally agree. So being blown away by wind sounds kind of nuts unless you think about it, in which case it's not super nuts, in this instance at least. There were more slightly nuttier explanations. And the thing is, you can't fully discount any one of these because the men's bodies were never found. So there was never any conclusive proof of what happened, even still to this day. And some of the likelier, less likely scenarios seem to always focus on Donald MacArthur, who was supposedly a bit of a hothead, quick to fists kind of dude. Not necessarily the kind of occasional keeper you'd want to have on rotation for 2 weeks with you, but that's what a lot of these secondary theories kind of presuppose.
He would have been the Willem Dafoe, right?
I guess so, yeah. I kind of imagine him as such. He
got the story from this, didn't he?
I don't know.
Curious.
I don't know. I'd have to watch it again now that I know that I hadn't even heard of this story when I saw The Lighthouse. So I need to watch it again and see what I think.
I'll have to do some research on that. I doubt if he based it on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if it triggered the idea or something.
Gotcha.
All right. So MacArthur was, like you said, a tough guy, a hothead, and he, of course, there's going to be speculation that he started a fight and they all got in a big fight and they all fell off the cliff together. Or maybe he murdered these two guys and then knew what his comeuppance would be and flung himself off the cliffs himself in sort of a murder-suicide situation.
Yeah, again, it's plausible. Like, some people can go nuts, like especially in extreme isolation kind of thing, but there's just no evidence whatsoever of any sort of fight. It's possible the fight started entirely outside, but it just doesn't satisfy all of the evidence, right?
I don't think so.
Like the guy whose weatherproof coats were still there was Donald MacArthur. So why would he start a fight outside in weather that was bad enough that his comrades would put on their weather gear?
Right. Or maybe when it comes to fighting, you don't want that raincoat on.
I guess maybe he found it restrictive. That's entirely possible too. But that's, again, as far as like these secondary kind of paranoid theories go, those make a lot more sense. The other ones just are much more squarely in the realm of paranormal.
Yeah, you could say that. The Outer Hebrides are home of the Kelpie. And the Kelpie is a water spirit, a shape-shifting water spirit that drowns human victims. But there are two problems with this. One, that is not real. And two, even if it was real, let's just do a thought experiment. Everyone knows that the Kelpies are not seaside dwellers. They are inland at the locks.
Right. They're not known to frequent the seaside.
No, they don't like that salt water.
No. So the Kelpies probably did not kill these men and cart them away.
there's more supernatural there, right?
Yeah, the